The Honourable Peter Dunn.
Mr Chairman, I just want to take a very brief call on the provisions of Part 1 of this bill, because it's been some considerable time since it's been before this House. It was in fact introduced in 2007 to make some minor technical amendments to the Gambling Act passed in 2003. Now, Mr Chairman, members will know that the Gambling Act is a very large and complex piece of legislation, and over the decade or so since it's been in operation, a number of issues have emerged that need to be tidied up because practice has changed or different situations have come into effect. There are large sums of money at stake here, and as a result it's important that we get a good system and that the funds that are raised from gambling go to the proceeds that they're meant to go to. And Mr Speaker, Mr Chairman, I have tabled a supplementary order paper that for the most part responds to a number of court cases that have taken place since the bill's introduction all those years ago. And these cases highlight parts of the Act about Class 4 gambling that are not necessarily clear, and the SOP amendments address this by providing a measure of clarification. The SOP makes clear the powers available against breaches of the law by gambling licensees. For example, the amendments to powers held by the Secretary for Internal Affairs include spelling out the ability to suspend or cancel licences for errant behaviour that occurred as a one-off at some point in the past. And the SOP also specifies the obligations on licensees after they are licensed, which include such duties as maximising the returns to the community from the gambling in question. The obligations are drawn from the criteria that need to be met when the relevant licence was first applied for. The SOP also contains a few minor and technical amendments, some of which correct drafting errors in the original legislation. In particular, there is a useful clarification of the requirements concerning the calculation of net proceeds by societies that run gambling operations. This refers to correctly reflecting the depreciation of the gambling assets, typically gaming machines, which are owned by societies. There's also an adjustment to the membership arrangements of the Board of New Zealand Lotteries to bring the Commission's membership capacity into line with similar Crown entities. Mr Chairman, I note that the Green Party has also tabled an SOP which makes far more significant alterations to the Act, which include expanding territorial authority powers over gaming machine venues and changes to the definition of authorised purpose so that racing stakes can no longer be permitted. The Government will not be supporting this SOP, and not only does it not conform to the intent of the bill to tidy up the Act, which is to allow the statutory regime to operate as originally intended, it also goes way beyond where I think the general public mood is at the moment. In fact, the changes in the SOP are very similar to many of the significant amendments that were included in the Maori Party's Gambling Harm Reduction Amendment Act that was passed in 2013. Now, all of these measures have been subject to many submissions to the Select Committee. The Government's been through those and went into an extensive process working with the Maori Party on that Amendment Act to reach common ground on some of the specific changes. The Amendment Act was supported in part by the Government at that time, and some of the amendments that are now in the Act duplicate those that are in the SOP. Mr Chairman, this includes a requirement to return gaming machine proceeds to the area where they are generated and the ability to introduce technology in gaming machines to minimise harm. Other reforms are included in the Gambling Amendment Bill No. 3, which I recently introduced, and that is the appropriate mechanism for making more substantive changes to the Act rather than a technical bill like this. Now, Mr Chairman, I was going to go through and summarise very briefly the content of Part 1, but I note that at this late hour, and in the interest of making some progress... I said make some progress. I'm very happy to just stay aside at this point and return to the bill at a later stage and allow for the debate to flow, because I know this is a gripping measure. Members have waited a long time for the opportunity to debate this bill, and I'm sure that there will be, if I judge by some of the comments so far, a very spirited involvement in the debate in the remaining minutes before the House rises this evening.
The Honourable Trevor Mallett.
Mr Chairman, thank you, Mr Chairman. And a few of us were wondering why this rapidly came up the order paper to become an urgent matter when it hadn't been so important for the government